I never get into his drug test bullshit. I never, I mean, I never even told anyone. Jon failed every drug test the entire week leading up to our fight. Every single drug test. I never brought it up one time in any interview, in any media thing, nothing. The commission called me every day to let me know that he was still failing his drug test.
What's up guys, Derek, moreplaysmoredates.com. Today we are going to be revisiting the Jon Jones debacle when it comes to PED use. Now you've probably heard me touch on it a handful of times at this point over the past couple years, and Jon is not a big fan of my content evidently because he has blocked me on Instagram, which is the biggest fuck you he can say to me in my content, I guess. But anyways, this clip emerged relatively recently. I thought it was interesting. It's a couple months old at this point, but I got an email from a guy who apparently this was like streamed on some show recently. Kind of weird how it was streamed recently given the fact that the actual original clip was April 20th, but this is an interview with Anthony Smith about his beef with Jon Jones, and he elucidates some pretty interesting information about the drug test parameters and what actually happened before their fight. I believe it was in 2019.
Where are we at with Jon Jones today? When we spoke last about a year ago, there was a little like, you were listen, but you were fair though. You're like, look, I may not like him as a person, but I can acknowledge that he's a hell of a fighter. Yeah,
I'm in the same place.
Okay.
We've had some I'd already had the break-in, right? When we talked,
Yeah.
After the Glover fight, he had a lot of really negative things to say and kind of taking some shots at me for the break-in and kind of making fun of me, which was really kind of out of left field because I've never attacked Jon personally. Up until that very point, he had never taken a shot at me personally. He'd obviously said he's going to kick my ass, that he didn't, he's even said like, I don't like that he said this, but he's never been able to refute anything I've said because I always talk about Jon very factually. Here, he does this well, he does that well. He was suspended for this, but I never get into his drug test bullshit. I never, I never even told anyone. Jon failed every drug test the entire week leading up to our fight. Every single drug test. I never brought it up one time in any interview, in any media thing, nothing. The commission called me every day to let me know that he was still failing his drug test. I never said anything. Like I let it be because I was just focused on myself, and I've always believed that if you just focus on yourself, you're going to be that much more successful. So I was very shocked that he took a shot at me personally, which was new. That was definitely a new one for Jon. I don't think it went well for him. I never even really said anything. I think he got a lot of backlash on social media for it. And again, we all know Jon doesn't do well with negative press. So he's left me. He hasn't said anything about me, but I've also, again, I've stayed very true to myself. I've never attacked him personally. I talked about him today on my radio show right before I got on.
Okay, so that is the clip, and pretty interesting. Let me just dig into the comments quick. How am I only hearing about this now through a TikTok clip? Crazy. More fans need to hear about this. Oh man, I can't keep up with all the social media platforms. Cool that people are reposting my stuff because the UFC is hiding the stuff from the public to protect our cash cows. Anthony Smith has just get my new level of respect. Shake my head. Jones is an asshole. I respect the Lionheart. He's a warrior. Can't believe he's fought 50 pro fights and I think over 20 Emmys. He literally got his ass ate by Jon. Jones had this man folded up in a ball. He beat the heart out of the lion. I don't get how this guy's still willing to talk about Jon Jones. Because he was juiced out of his mind, duh. Jen, when are we going to go on our first date? Crying, laughing face ×4. Well, that's not exactly surprising considering he was still testing positive for the Gus fight right before that. It's the same thing. If the commission deems it doesn't have an effect on your performance, they're not going to do anything. Same thing happened to Nate versus Masvidal. Obviously, Jon was rated up for years. He's bound to have trace amounts in his system. Is this really true? He bringing up Jones to get clout. He didn't bring up Jones, though. The interviewer did. Are you on OnlyFans? So if you look at Jon Jones like suspensions and positive test results and whatnot, so his third suspension, rematch with Daniel Cormier, July 29, 2017. Let's see. Like, on August 22nd, it was announced that Jon had been flagged for a potential doping violation by USADA stemming from a sample that was collected after weigh-ins July 28th. Tested positive for T-ball, anabolic steroids, was placed on provisional suspension as a result. September 13th, USADA confirmed both the A and B samples positive for turinabol. Officially overturned the result of the fight to a no contest. Subsequently, UFC President Dana White made the decision to strip him of the light heavyweight championship. 2018, it was announced USADA Jones would serve a suspension of 15 months. From a potential suspension of 48 months, USADA applied a reduction of 30 months for his cooperation in identifying other anti-doping offenses. So basically, helping them, root out other people cheating, I guess. You can take from that what you will. And a further 3 months was applied by arbitrators McLaren in relation to Jones' degree of fault. So again, since then, these pulsations, people always talk about the pulsations. Like, why has he not pulsed for clomiphene when he literally tested positive for that years ago? And that is the compound they often use as their literature reference for why turinabol is still pulsing. Like, to me, that's a really fucking weird thing that's not been brought up once. Is one of the original serums he popped for was clomiphene citrate, which is traditionally used in a post-psychotherapy context to recover endogenous testosterone production after using steroids. Now, it'd be a dumb compound to use, obviously, because it's very detectable through GCMS, but back then, maybe they thought they had more leeway, and it's entirely possible whatever he was using was tainted as well. But when you have a T-ball, metabolite, and then you end up having pulsations, throughout your career, but then for some reason you've never had pulsations of clomiphene when you've also tested positive for clomiphene, very, very fucking weird, no? Given that it's the literal thing that they use as their platform to stand upon when discussing the, verified, justifying the turinabol pulsation theory. So this article is, there was a few articles made about the video, obviously. This was sportsmanner.com. Jon Jones failed every drug test leading up to UFC 235. Anthony Smith makes a shocking revelation. Majority of fans believe Jon Jones is the greatest fighter to ever grace the UFC octagon. It's hard to ignore the blemishes he has throughout his career. Let's see. Defending his title against Anthony Smith, UFC 235. Prior to that fight, Jones failed the USADA test against Alexander Gustafsson, which resulted in UFC changing the venue for the event on 1 week's notice. And as per Anthony Smith's comments in a recent interview on the Jenna Ben show, Jon Jones failed drug tests before UFC 235 as well. Anthony Smith opened up on his rivalry with Jon Jones and how the former light heavyweight champion made fun of him for his loss against Texera. I don't know if I'm butchering that, and his run-in with the home intruder. Yeah, so anyways, going over the revealed Jones failed the USADA test throughout the fight week for UFC 235. Now, if that's true, then there's a huge problem in the sport right now. USADA recently announced that if a fighter fails a drug test, then the information won't be made public. That puts this entire sport in jeopardy. There's a huge possibility that a top UFC star will get away with failed drug tests easily, just as Jones did. As far as Jones' legacy is concerned, it is certainly dented after so many drug tests throughout his UFC career, and it also must be mentioned that his performances have been deteriorating ever since his return after the USADA suspension. Now some fans support Jon Jones despite all these controversies, but it's needless to say that with so many controversies in his career, these failed tests will seriously affect Jones' legacy. So I definitely have noticed that his fights have become less and less one-sided over the more recent years. Is that just age? Is that what is that? Because obviously he's pretty fucking strict on what he's been doing to prepare still, at least. By the looks of it, it seems like he is more adhering to a strict schedule than in his, earlier years when he was just blowing guys out of the water and, partying before the fucking fights and shit. Granted, I can't say for certain that that's indicative of anything, but it is certainly notable nonetheless. But again, he is getting older. Maybe it's just age, but he's not that old. There's guys who are improving in performance who are older than him. Guys like Usman, but again, obviously that's a video that probably needs to be done as well. Granted, Usman is not, that much older. It's only a couple months or something like that, if I recall correctly. But, there are individuals in that age bracket who are indeed improving and or sustaining their performance, whereas he seems to be somewhat deteriorating, at least proportionally, based upon his previous fights back in the day. Not that long ago, not back in the day, but you know what I mean. So a lot of speculation about what's going on, and frankly, when you see his urine analysis results, it's kind of hard to not just be okay, shit's being swept under the rug at this point, because it's how crashed can your fucking hormones be your natural hormones indicative of exogenous androgen deployment, like how crashed can they be before somebody's like, hey, this is pretty obvious. Like if you see a guy walking around with a, you know, like 20 nanogram per deciliter test level, it's like you either have a, you know, pituitary adenoma, you have like hyperprolactinemia, you have some sort of fucking weird medical condition, or you're using exogenous androgens. And with Jones, he is a healthy fucking premier genetic specimen of a fighter who has never historically had any weird aberrations in anything, at least notably. And then, you know, when some of the urine analysis results are leaked, he gets, you notice that all of his, for some reason, his test levels are like fucking 100 times lower than his competitors. You know, is that a coincidence? Or not all of his competitors, but at least, you know, to some of the guys who the data was also released on, like Cormier. So, you know, it's not just about the testosterone to epitestosterone ratio, it's also about seeing the actual urinary concentrations of the endogenous steroids that you produce. So if you have a testosterone level that is nearly like fucking undetectable essentially relative to a natural guy, you know, red flags. It's not just because your T to E ratio is weird, it's also because your T is essentially like non-existent in your urine. Like, why would that be? It's kind of weird. Like, do you basically just have adrenal steroid production causing whatever test is in your urine at this point because you're totally shut down from whatever anabolics you're using? Is it possible that you were using designer drugs and then this one time you happen to get something that is you know, tainted with turinabol or has turinabol in it, or you just straight up used turinabol because you thought you could get away with it and you didn't know about the Rodchenkov studies? What's up, dude? Like, there is no explanation for having a T that fucking crashed whilst having positive test results. So, you know, for me, I think Jones has the, you know, more scrutiny on him now, but I think that some of these stuff that was pretty blatantly clear kind of got overlooked a little bit in order to, you know, I guess not have a black eye on the sport sort of thing and, you know, sort of sweep it under the rug a bit, like I said. So, is that why his performance is deteriorating lately? Or it's like he's still fucking winning. Is it deteriorating? What do you guys think in the comments down below? All the comments help the algorithm. And do you think it is a result of his lack of dominant finishes lately? Do you think it is a result of him having a closer eye on him now and he can't use what he used to use? Or what do you think the reason is? Let me know in the comments down below. All the comments help the algorithm. They're much appreciated. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. TRT Clinic, it's all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home, with my recommended lab tests and diagnostics to stay on top of your health, as well as to optimize your hormones if needed based on your own assessment of biomarkers and whatnot and your own current health status, which will be interpreted by experts at my clinic. That is in the video description, like I mentioned, and anything else I'm associated with is all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.